My name is David Peters, and I'm the lead arborist at this facility. And before we go any further, first and foremost, I want to let you know, to our belief, we are safe. In that these creatures, to our understanding and based on data that we have been keeping, very accurate data for some time now, we do believe these creatures are entirely vegetarian in nature. Well, that's what we thought at first when we were making these observations. We thought there was no way a spider, a member of the arachnid family, of which there are over 40,000 classes, known classes, could be vegetarian in nature. These are not necessarily meat eaters, but they do drink blood from creatures that are made up predominantly of meat, such as ourselves. So you can imagine our fear upon discovering such large creatures, of which we will attempt to get closer later at one of their nests, not here. This guy's out in the open, and even though we believe we're safe based upon the data, we want to be responsible and we do not want to take any unnecessary risks. But I would like to share with you and with your viewers, and this, you can Google this, well, as long as your phone stays on. But here's the proof. This beautiful little creature right here, and this is the information that led us to believe that our data was accurate indeed. This little spider is called the Bagheera kiplingi. It is located in South American countries such as Mexico, Costa Rica, and Guatemala. This little beauty is also vegetarian in nature. This small one in South America is believed to be the very first vegetarian spider discovered. Now, we believe we've discovered the second, and these very large, extremely huge, almost man-sized giant spiders that have been descending upon the East Coast. Now, as is the case with the discovery of most new species, you see evidence of the existence of something out of the norm before you actually discover the species. And this was the case here with these giant vegetarian spiders, which, by the way, we are calling Ginormica enormica. Phylum Ginormica enormica, because they are ginormous and enormous. But what you see here is the browning of a limb on an evergreen tree, this being a Leland cypress. This is out of the norm. Evergreens and other conifers, pine-producing trees and shrubs, such as, cone-producing, such as pine. Forgive me. These are difficult times, and sometimes the wires get crossed up here, but they'll go through a process called natural dieback about once a year or once every 2 years, where they'll have needles or entire limbs worth of needles which will brown and shed, and it makes way for new growth. Well, we had many stands of our evergreen trees that had already gone through the natural process of natural dieback, yet appeared to be doing so again very prematurely. This is when we knew something had a penchant, a taste for evergreens and conifers. And it was shortly thereafter in which we started observing our eastern red cedars, our white pines, our loblolly pines, that we finally discovered exactly what was going on. And it wasn't long before, as you can see here, we caught them in actual action. Now, this is as close as we dare get to one of these suckers again during the day, and from the side or from the front. We do believe we will be able to sneak up on one, if not more than one, a bit later at one of their known nests. But here you can see this, well, I would say cute little creature, but it's quite sizable, hence the name Ginormica. It's clinging to the side of an eastern red cedar, half of which it's just devoured. It's just devoured this eastern red cedar. Now, the good news, on top of the fact that these creatures do appear to be entirely vegetarian, is that they're also very, very conscious of using their resources, in that they don't waste. Before this creature is finished with this tree, it will devour it entirely before it moves on. And we'll show you an example of this just up on top of the hill here above one of our apple orchards, where one of its cousins or perhaps sisters or brothers have been doing the same thing with a white pine for quite some time. As you can see, as I was explaining earlier, here one of the species, first it delimbed the tree, just as we previously saw one of its close relatives doing with the eastern red cedar. It delimbed it, it sucked all the pine sap, the moisture, all the nutrients out of the limbs, and then it went to work on the trunk, and now it seems to be sucking what is left up out of the roots. So they are very, very socially conscious in that they do not waste resources. Perhaps we could learn a lesson from these newly discovered creatures. So we're very cautiously heading to a known nesting area at this time, and I want to discuss with you one anomaly we found with their diet, and that is, as I'd mentioned earlier, they seem to feed almost primarily and exclusively on evergreens. The good news is we have not captured these incidences of these creatures feeding on any sort of desirable hardwood such as oak or black cherry. They have not touched any of our fruit trees in any of our orchards, but they do seem to enjoy weeping willow trees. We believe this is due to the high moisture content in the weeping willow trees. Perhaps this is where they get their drink. Perhaps it's how they wash down the pine sap from the conifers and the evergreens. But other than the weeping willows, they do not appear to harm in any way any sort of hardwoods. I see a bit of scat here. I'm not trying to be gross, just to show you the data we've been collecting. Here's some evidence that we're close to a nesting area. Here we see some scat. It looks like that of a cat perhaps, or a fox, but it's not. We've found this too often around their nesting sites. So we believe we're getting close. We're getting close to the woods. They like to nest right on the edge of the woods. It appears as if we've located a nest. So we've managed to get to within only feet of a ginormica, enormica, sitting on its nest. And here you can see an example of their webbing. This is the only time in which we've seen them web. They build their nests out of refuse, the leftovers of what they've eaten. Once they've completely taken the nutrients out of the pines, out of the cedars, after the Leland cypresses, they'll bring them back in nests. They're very dry nests, probably very flammable. But the only other tree they've seemed to have gone after are weeping willows. We think this might be because of the high moisture content in the weeping willows. Perhaps this is how they drink. They eat with the evergreens, the conifers, they drink the moisture from the weeping willows. But unlike the pines and the other evergreens, they don't feed on sight with the weeping willows. They'll clip them down with their very sharp pinchers, their incisors, their teeth, and then they web them up. And their webbing is very thick. It almost appears to be like a bed sheet. They wrap the willows up, they bring them back, and they feed on this on the nest. It's very odd. We don't know why they do this, but they have been doing this since we began to observe these creatures. The good news, again, aside from the fact that they seem to be vegetarian in nature, entirely vegetarian in nature, is that they don't seem to consume any desirable hardwoods such as the oaks or the hickories or the black cherries, and thus far they've left our fruit trees alone as well. Now this nursery is kind of dependent on high volume weeping willow sales, but fortunately those are also the easiest trees to propagate in mass numbers. So we do believe that we can coexist with these very large, nearly man-sized spiders. There's no need to eradicate them. You know, you go through the cycle, you discover them. First it's disbelief, then it's acceptance, then it's, you want to play the blame game. You know, if you're a Democrat, you want to say that it's the Republicans' fault that these creatures are in existence. If you're a Republican, you want to say these creatures exist because of Democrats. But we're none of that. We're naturalists. This is part of nature. There's enough space, there's enough resources for all of us. We just need to learn to get along. And that's the lesson we're going to try to learn from ginormica, enormica, and we hope you can learn that lesson as well. Thanks for being with us here, and check in with us next time to see what other sort of strange things we might find here at the nursery or anywhere else on the East Coast or elsewhere.